Okay, so I guess we are 4 minutes in. I'm going to take one minute of your time, guys, and thank you for joining us. We have Joanna and Peter, two great speakers that are going to talk about product and the pitch to product in a changing world. Um, uh, Before briefly introducing them and handing them over, thanks for being on the Lean Agile Network. You can find myself, Wayne, and Nasima if you have any questions later on or during the session. We are on Slack, Meetup, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Follow us, and we put our presentations even before the pandemic on YouTube, so that you can enjoy that. So Peter and Joanna are the co-authors of a book called Gen P: New Generation of Product Owners, who cares about customers. And they are going to talk to us about the pitch to product in a changing world. I Both of them are. I'm not. I might be wrong if I say, Peter, you are currently an instructor in a U of T, but I know that yeah, both of them are instructors in U of T. And with nothing further, everyone, please welcome Joanna and Peter for have a chat with us for the next 55 minutes.
Great, thank you so much. So Peter and I met at U of T actually. We are both instructors there. We are still are. So I've been teaching there for the last 11 years, so since 2009. And as we met and we worked on a product, which was a course that we were developing at U of T, we realized that we have so many things that we had in common in terms of a project versus product experience. So, I mean, we both teach, but we've had a very active life outside teaching, managing projects and products. I started at Scotiabank in the project management office, and then I moved to the product development side in the development team at ITNS, where I led the mobile development team. So when I got there to lead the mobile development team, I realized what it means to actually manage a product and why we're doing projects. So I had the aha moment because while I was in the PMO, we were so focused on managing projects and focusing on the tools and focusing on the checklist and focusing on putting the documentation together. And then when I moved to the product development, I was like so surprised that I had to focus on the customer and I had to focus on the value and I had to focus on the customer to buy the product because otherwise we wouldn't be successful. And it was like, wow, if I had all that information when I managed the project, I would be so much better as a project manager. And that's where I spent the last years trying to talk to people into buying into this idea of value and products and customers. So that's in a nutshell my background. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Joanna, and welcome everyone. So I have my journey started off as in a technical field as an engineer in telecommunications, and I was working doing projects but didn't realize it and became one of these accidental project managers. As I started managing larger, more complex projects, complicated projects, I soon started to learn that I needed to know a lot more about the business and what was that product that this project was creating and why was the business creating it and what was important about the product. And I soon saw that I was moving much more into being focused on the business side. And as I left my project management behind, the manager behind, being more focused on the business, looking at products and looking at the products that organizations were being investing in. I was, as Joanna mentioned, we've been teaching at University of Toronto, looking at their products and seeing how do we adapt their products to meet the needs of the students that U of T will get as well. My journey continued on a volunteer role project within PMI, and I served a number of volunteer roles in PMI, including being on the global board of directors, which also gave me this perspective. And my aha moment was as PMI started saying this idea that projects deliver Strategy, I realized that was part of the story, but not the full story. Projects deliver products. Products deliver value to customers that ultimately will help deliver benefits to organizations that will allow them to achieve their strategy. And this is where I became so passionate about how we organizations need to spend more and more time and attention on their products, not just produce a product and throw it over to ongoing operations, but really start focusing on trying to manage that product through the full life cycle, focusing on delivering value. Anyway, I'll get a little too far ahead of myself here for what we're going to share with you over the next 50 minutes or so. So you can see our contact information there. Please reach out to us. As Shaheen mentioned, we very kindly about our book that we wrote. You can see the front cover behind me, GenP, New Generation of Product Owners, available on Amazon. And we formed newgenp.com. Joanna and I formed newgenp.com to help bring product owners together to talk about some of the skills and knowledge that product owners need, and we'll get into product owners because we're taking a much more broader approach than Scrum is around this, but around product ownership in order for organizations, we believe, to be successful. So for this session today, we're going to divide this up into 4 sort of sections, and we want this to be very interactive. We're going to introduce, we'll first start talking about some of the trends that we see today around products. Then we'll talk about products and customers and the relationship between the two and the importance of that. We'll talk about the product life cycle and how we need to manage that, and in some cases try to extend it. And then at the end, the 4th section, we'll talk about product owners and product managers and other terms that are used for people in organizations that are looking after products. We want this to be an interactive session, so please, we're a relatively small group, so please feel free to open up your mics and chip in with your thoughts. We'll be asking you questions, so you can either chip in on the mics or put them in the chat window as we will go through and try to, learn and get some thought around this all together. So with that, let's get started. And one of the things that we will start first off talking about, I think I'm supposed to switch the slide. That means I have to do 2 things at the same time. Always a challenge for me. So one of the things that we, what's the story they said about Gerald Ford couldn't chew gum and walk at the same time? So we've got the presidential election coming up. So one of the things that we're seeing, we're all experiencing with COVID-19 is the challenges it's facing on us, on our organizations and on our products. Right? We're seeing that companies are struggling to keep going. How do they survive? How do they, in this way where people are not going out as much, they're not gathering in groups as much. They're concerned about their own jobs, so they're not spending as much. So how are you going to survive? What has to happen to products, rather, I should say. Now, Joanna and I debate this. I mean, I'm saying that the COVID is just accelerating some of the trends that we were seeing, especially with technology and technology disruptors coming into this world in such a faster pace. So Joanna, maybe you could just expand a little bit more on what some of the trends that you see are happening around products.
Yeah, I guess what we are doing is that we are talking to real people and we are conducting a lot of interviews. And one thing that we are putting out there to you is that we don't consider ourselves to be experts, but we are considering to be gathering this information for you, because we want to make sure that we explain the information in a way, being educators for U of T and knowing how to put the messages together, how these trends are being practiced, what's happening in organizations, so we all understand what's happening there, and not just read about it or read the theory, because in theory everything sounds so nice. And then we get the theory. You come here, you look at that and say, oh, that was such a nice picture. And those were so nice words. And then you go to work on Monday and you may not remember anything. And if you remember something and you say, okay, let's put it in practice, it doesn't work. So one of the things that we talked to people about was what's actually really happening in their organizations from a product perspective. A lot of them for sure are struggling. I struggled when I was at Scotia or at IGM because the organization didn't even know what the product was. So when we were defining products and we were asking, what's your product? What are you selling? It was very hard to define what the product is. Mind you, that they weren't even able to define who the product team was or who the product owner was or what the product owner actually as a role was. So I think from a trend perspective, we saw over the years that we are getting very good at executing. So meaning that we have all these project management practices and templates and terminology around project management. Like we started with waterfall and traditional, then we got agile. We are very focused right now on Scrum or just getting that execution piece or the development piece of our products. But then looking at the overall product, we're still struggling. The product life cycle is not something that we are very good at because we don't even understand what the product life cycle is. And we are still debating around that. And it's also based on every organization and their industry and their business models and what they are exactly doing there. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing that there is inside organizations, there is a community of practice, or we call it PMOs, or we call it center of excellences that are very focused on the execution, and they are good at that. They have all the ingredients that they need around projects, programs, portfolios, and so on. We also see that there are some product talks out there in terms of the product. We know that we have to make the shift from project to product because this is, Agile introduced that concept of product because we need to focus on the value delivery. We still we will have a debate here because I created a lot of noise with a picture that I put on LinkedIn and Facebook with product owners and product managers. We see that happening there. What is ownership? What is management? Is that a function or is that a role? What does it do? And then where we ultimately want to get the people to focus, and we're not there yet, is on the customer centricity. So focusing on the customer, getting that, outcome really articulated in terms of what would be the main focus for us. And this is where we want to open it for your experience. And as we do that, maybe Peter, if you have anything else to add to that, and then we'll continue to see if anyone wants to join the conversation.
Yeah, so really let's use the chat box or open up the mics, as I said, to just see what are the challenges that you're facing today. Is it a new technology coming in? Are you trying to figure out a business model for your products that will help you deal with the fact that customers are not showing up? And what are the challenges that you're facing? So don't be shy. Let's see what you have to say. We're just a small group among friends here.
I have
Very
a,
safe.
I have a question for you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see that you call the product ownership and management trends, and on the left you have project, program, and portfolio. So what I have seen once in my professional life was that is people move from project to products by just calling them products. So we are going to work in a product centric way, but they called it product. They used all the projects. So I see that you have a clear distinction between these two. If you have to talk to someone about, okay, so this is one thing that you have to call it a product versus a project, what would that be? Or one or two main distinctions?
I mean, the project will be part of the product at some point, but what's happening is that it's very hard to articulate in terms of the project these days. Some people call them iterations. They don't even call them projects. With Scrum, they call them sprints. So you have a product that you work on, and then you have sprints around that product. So you don't even have a project um, uh, actually done because you are managing at the product level. And that's what we calling the trends. We calling the product trends because we're seeing a move from the project thinking that we had before, where you had a temporary endeavor. So basically, that was it. For a limited period of time, you would deliver something, a result, a service, a product to your customer. And the problem was with that definition was that we was never value, like we never had that idea of value to customers. So that was something that, it's evolving over time. And then on the product side, it's clearly that that product, as you develop that product, that would be the core, not only the core of your business, but you will give that product to the consumer so they will consume it, and then they will do something with it. They will pay for it, well, either themselves or somebody else, or as you make a gift or something. So I was having that debate with somebody saying that they split their product internally into registration, into he said into smaller products like registration,
Yeah.
login. So I said, well, how can you shape a registration as a product? This is very interesting because the registration will be more of a feature
Right.
to the product that you have. Can you actually sell the registration by itself and make it a product with its own life cycle?
Mhm.
That's something that we see from a definition perspective. It has to have its own life cycle. It has to be consumed by the customer in a certain way, and deliver something of value to the customer, solve a need of some sort.
Yeah, maybe I jumped ahead. You guys are going to talk about the life cycle of products. So
Yes, a little bit on that, so then we can clarify this thing. I mean,
Uh,
as we are evolving is definitely something that you will see. Everybody has their own interpretations. We're just trying to see what's happening from a trend perspective in the organizations, how these organizations are evolving. Amazon, for example, why are they still successful? What is their focus?
yeah.
Shaheen, is Gordon speaking, by the way? Was your question the difference between product management and project management?
No, my question was basically how to easily say if is this a product or not. Like maybe like 30 seconds pitch, like or something that if someone comes and say, oh, because in my experience, someone called the project product and the life cycle was not a sprint level, it was like 6 month level. And then I was trying to say like the product needs to live on. And you're like, no, every product is going out of the life cycle. Like, and this product's life cycle is six months. So I didn't have that much more to discuss and tell. So maybe when they talk about product life cycle, I get to know more. But that was my question.
Yes, and we'll talk about that more, but definitely it's longer life cycle. So it's
Right.
not a temporary one. It includes many other things than the project life cycle. And it uses the project basically as an enablement or as an engine to deliver something to the hands of the customer.
I have a question for the speakers. Is it possible? Is there a hypothesis that says um, it's the reason why we don't have project managers in product development? It's simply because we have a product owner who understands the process of the product and the steps it goes through versus the delivery steps of how you deliver it. That's a question.
That's a question. If we're gonna have project managers involved in product.
Was that a question?
No, I was just trying to clarify if that's your question, Gordon. If I understood correctly your question, you asking if project managers can work in product?
Um, really, I was answering the two questions, or at least it was a question to you guys. If you're finding the argument around what is the difference between product and project, and can you clearly define it? I'm proposing to you that the simple answer was for me, in product development, I actually don't have a project manager. I have a product owner, and everything funnels through. Hence why Scrum, for example, is an agile methodology, does not have project managers, because it's a product-centric type of work.
And that's okay. This is not what we're seeing in most organizations. What we're seeing is that in what they call it product, they still using projects to deliver products and still have project managers. However, I was talking to Peter earlier today. I talked to somebody at Amazon, and they were having product life cycles, and they were managing the product life cycle. They having product managers managing their product, and they have no project managers, and they don't even have Scrum Master. So basically, the product managers, and they don't have Scrum or anything. They work in iterations, but basically their theory is about getting stuff done, or just making sure that things are working properly. And then that they were saying we don't have project managers there.
So I'm agreeing with you. I'm even going 2 or 3 steps further to say we should actually declare it as that, to stop all the confusion, because there's an awful lot of management who still feel that the project managers have a role in product development. Anyway, I'll move off of the point.
Yeah, I know, and we'll talk about that, and I'm happy that you brought it up. I think it's also the change that organizations need to do, and this is going back to the organizational structures and how you go about and telling people, hey, from tomorrow we're gonna be focusing on the product, and by the way, all the project managers should die or something like that. I don't know. It's just that discussion that needs to be had. And it's again, like, what do you do? Some people may argue and say, well, if you don't have, even in product management, if you don't have a sort of engine to deliver these products and to manage, all these pieces that we're going to show you from a product lifecycle perspective, then, who's going to do it?
So last comment, because I don't want to capitalize on the whole conversation, but I'll tell you the reason why I'm actually asking these questions is I'm in conversations about agility within an organization. And when you look at agility, it becomes, what are the products and services that we're putting into the marketplace, and how do we reinvent ourselves? Not how do we improve our project management delivery.
Right. And maybe we can go to the next slide, because what we put there was something that, that follows your thought, Gordon. So it's something that we've noticed, that customers, it's about what customers care about. And we definitely figured out in conversation with people that customers didn't care about projects at all. Like, as you buy some stuff from anywhere, even from Amazon, I don't think we ever wondered when we order our things, what project methodology is Amazon working with, or are they having any project risk logs, or what are their constraints around projects. So we see that happening a lot, and that's a question that organizations need to care more. What do my customers care about at the end of the day? What do I need to deliver? And for sure, they will care about the quality of the product that you will have. That's what they will buy. They will buy security, of that product. You want to have secure payments. The features, they need to be reliable and they need to function well. We also see that brand recognition very important. So this is something that we're seeing a lot, meaning that where you buy from or the product that you're using, they need to come from reliable sources. We like our friends to refer these products for us. If I don't know, I like somebody on Twitter and I see that they're using a product and they are recommending it, it's definitely something that I would go and buy just because they recommend it. So that brand recognition is also important. And associating yourself with it, saying, "Oh, I bought from that particular brand." You know, a Gucci purse for me, for example, not for Peter. So, any other comments? So Santil is saying, as a co-founder of a startup company, we don't have project managers. My partner and myself has some skill set to run the project and the product vision. And that's what we see for the startups. Although I worked for a startup and it was really heavy on project management and it was mostly waterfall. So you can find that as well for startups. Anything that you want to add, Peter?
Um, you know, I'll just go back to, thank you to Shaheen's question originally, and not want to reopen that discussion completely, but this idea between a product and a project. So one of the things in my experience I learned with, as I was a project manager, is when I finished a project, I threw the product over the wall somewhere. And I really didn't care where it landed. And in some cases, I should say many cases, I found out it didn't land anywhere and just sort of sat there until something broke, right? If we're talking about the IT projects, you know, the operating system change didn't work, and then it was a crisis.
And another project.
And then it became another project to fix the crisis, right? And this is what I see as where organizations struggle. It's if there was a product owner over there, someone who could take ownership of it and make sure it was being, you know, keeping up to date, keeping current, delivering value, that would never have happened. And then in my mind, that's where the big difference is. Now, you know, we talk about, well, you know, this question, and, you know, I understand Joanna and I were working for a startup company as well, and we don't have project managers. You know, we're using a very iterative approach to do our daily stand-up, to talk about what we're going to, or maybe it's a daily Zoom more appropriately. What are we going to work on from our backlog and keep working on the things that are most important to work on? Very much of that type of approach, which is what you would normally do in many cases. But as the companies grow, as you start going, you know, at some point in time, we're going to have to say, okay, we're going to need someone to do this little bit of development work. And in fact, we did do that. We had to create a workbook, and we got one of our friends to help us out. And, you know, she managed that project to create the workbook, right? So as a project manager, but when she was done, she threw it back to us as we own it, right? So I can still see there'll be a role for project managers in doing the development part of the product, but when they throw it over the wall, the project owner is there to catch it. Okay, so let's go back on and get on to this part of what customers really care about. So Joanna, I'm just going to go to the next slide, and I think we can talk a little bit more about this idea that, you know, this idea of throwing something over a wall to a product owner is to allow this very important cycle to occur where the product owner can make sure and communicate with their customer that they're delivering value and be there to listen to the customer who's giving us feedback, right? Because if you don't have that in place, how do you know if your customer's delivering value? How do you know when the customers are struggling and not working the way they had intended, right? So you think about the taxi industry, you know, who just kept doing ongoing operations and didn't understand their customers were being frustrated when they had to pay cash and they didn't have enough cash in their wallet, or they thought their taxi cab driver was taking them on a little bit of a scenic tour of the town because they wanted to run up the fare, or didn't know when the taxi was going to show up or finding an empty one, right? Well, Uber figured that out. Founder of Uber figured out that he could solve those problems and really deliver more value to people who wanted a ride than what the taxi cab industry was doing. Taxi cab industry didn't listen, didn't hear. Joanna, want to add to that?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's also even for us as owners of New GMP and writing a book. And for those of you who want to write a book, you have to realize that the execution part and writing a book is the easy part. Okay, so you sit down, you write the book. Although some people say, "Oh, it's big work." Well, Peter and I did it in 5 weeks. The big work comes the moment you put it out there for the customers. Okay, so the readers, and this is where you have to listen for the feedback. You're not even only listening for the feedback, but you really have to relate to that feedback, and it's hard, especially as you are a product owner and you have a product so dear to your heart and you're so passionate about it. Relating to the feedback is not as easy as you would think, because you have to leave that subjective concept that you have in your mind about your own thing, and you really have to put yourself in the shoes of the customer. And then you really have to think about, okay, what's the context? Why are they saying that? Why do I have to do all those things, and how do I have to do it? Because you really need to provide some actions out there. So the actions, and the changes that you're making and all those things that, you need to incorporate, that's a different story. And that's what we see in organizations struggling as well. Getting that feedback from the customer and trying to relate to the feedback, and also think about the next steps, what they are going to do. Most of them, they are ignoring these comments. And I'm one of the victims of Air Canada, because I had a trip booked during COVID, and of course they haven't returned the money to us. The flight was canceled, and then you go to them and you tell them these things, and they come back with basically a prefab uh, response saying, "Oh, we're working hard to make sure that we are offering the best customer experience possible." That's their response. And you say, what? So those are the things that we have to think about as we responding to our customers. And then how do you incorporate that feedback and create more value? Because for sure, Air Canada lost me as a client.
So what are some of the techniques that you guys are using to get feedback from your customers? Or just being like Air Canada, not listening at all?
I think Ian has a very interesting comment saying that product managers were in the sales department in his organization and the project managers were in the IT department. That's what we see as well. Um, the product team was basically embedded in sales because the sales team was the closest to the customer, so they had that directly relationship with the customer as they were selling products out there. So we see the same. If it's not sales, it's probably more marketing. But it wasn't definitely, in a product team per se that were taking care of sales, marketing, customers experience, innovation, all that thing that is embedded in the product life cycle.
And may I jump in?
Yes,
Please
please.
do.
And my feedback would be sometimes the relationship between the self-service and the IT service was a bit hard because we didn't talk to the same on the same plan. We didn't. Sometimes it was a bit hard to be understood, but maybe it was better for the customer. Maybe. About the feedback, I would say we use online survey, and we try to meet the clients regularly to get their feedback. it's our way. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And we're seeing, yeah, I mean, different organizations doing different things. We see them reaching out through surveys, simple or more complicated questions, or just, the stars. I think the feedback is great to get. I think also, like, what do you do with that data is also important. How do you process everything that you're getting in? So, so having a mechanism to do that as you get this feedback is also important. Shaheen, you have a question?
Yeah, so I was going to say that from time to time we run this on 1 day online session, Agile Games, or it used to be in person.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback, the way that we are looking at the feedback is several levels. One level we send out a newsletter. The first feedback that we would get is how many people from that newsletter click the buttons and gone to the website, how many are they unsubscribed, how many of them bought them the tickets. And then after we run the event, if you look at them customers, then we are going to talk to them and figure out what did you like about this and what didn't you not like about it and what do you want to see next. So it's, if you look at that as a product, this is how, like, at the end of it, the best feedback that we get is talking to them. Like the earliest stages is, I call it feedback, but it might be indicators rather than feedbacks. They're indicating that they're interested or not. But at the end of the, after the session, we get some feedback and then talk, for the next one.
Right, and you can do things as you mentioned at the prospect level, so even before they buy your
Right.
product, so you know their behavior, and this is what organizations are doing. They're trying to monitor the behavior of their customers and where they going to buy something, why they buying a certain product versus another.
Right.
And I remember Tesla talking about that. They had at some point a lot of customers buying a model, and they were just seeing the customer behavior. Why would they go there? What are they planning to buy? What do they like in that model? Do they like the price better, or do they like a feature in there that will make that product unique and they wanted to purchase?
Right.
Okay, so that's great feedback. Deep incident analysis is paramount in my view. So Ian saying that.
Yeah, I think we can't agree more because so I was just typing into Gordon's comment, at least I think I got the comment back, was, what we're seeing in this very hyper competitive world where we can service customers anywhere in the world, from anywhere in the world, that if you're not solving today the problem your customer has, or if your product is not solving it perfectly, then your competitors will. And one of the ways to avoid it is getting feedback from your customers, especially feedback that may not be as positive, showing that some of the faults so that you can solve that problem better, right? And the thing is, our customers aren't always the change, or so get it right. The customers are changing as things are changing, right? So the world that we had back in a year ago is very different today because of COVID. Our customers are having different problems. So are we actually adapting our products to solve that or not? Okay, shall we move on, Joanna? We already started talking about the product life cycle, so let's get into that a little bit more.
Yeah, and you can see here, like, we're trying to embed all these things that we talked about, and we're trying to make a more comprehensive product life cycle. Just and be open to comment on it, and based on your experience and what you're seeing for sure. And is definitely, between the idea. So even as the product is not born, you have only an idea out there that could deliver something of value to a potential customer, so you don't even have customers, to the entire market validation where you validate a concept. And then you can see the execution is just a part of it. And this is where we see that a lot of focus being put in, to deliver that. Most of us talk about this circle in the middle. But there is so much to talk about the other things as well, especially on the market validation. We missing a lot of points there, thinking that, oh, it's okay, it's gonna work. Just throw it out there in the market and we'll see if it survives or it sticks. And this is where we spend a lot of money as organizations to then promote and do a lot of, support to make sure that it's actually working. Then there is the sales and marketing component, and to the point that, at some point, these products, what we see, they will diminish and they will disappear eventually and will exit the market. And we see this, during COVID, uh, some of them being put on hold, some of them exiting completely. There is a lot of talk happening right now in terms of commercial space and how this commercial space is becoming more and more empty, or how all these big boats and cruises are sitting somewhere being docked, in a harbor, and they are being not used, or all those things that we see out there. We see that, and there might be on their way to exit, or they're just on hold until customers will use them again. And on top of that, we see that there are other things that are happening around your product that you really, as a product owner, need to think about, which is the whole change process for your organization. As Peter said, you develop your project, you throw it over the fence, and all those change activities, who's doing that? The training for your customer support. Usually people didn't know how to answer the phones on a particular product because they didn't know what the product was. So these are things that you also want to manage as part of this life cycle, the continuous integration and making sure that you have an enhancement model for your products as well. Any feedback?
Uh, just to maybe add to what I see here, that you have a iteration, or like a circle going around the agile execution. Like we see that this bubble is getting bigger and bigger. Now they're talking about agile sales and marketing, agile market validation, right?
Ah.
They might be bigger, or they might be different circles within each other that connected.
Right. And I was talking to somebody who's teaching agile marketing, and there is an entire discussion around agile marketing. The same way there is an entire discussion about design, and how we do design these days. Because design, as I was working with the marketing team, the design team was very waterfall. So they were doing all these things, in a certain order. They didn't know how to iterate more and more. So we see that happening there as well. So, which is great news. And that's a great observation, because yes, those cycles can be in other parts as well.
I have a question. I see you have continuous improvement and continuous change. Always change for me meant improvement. So I am guessing that continuous change is something external that happens to your environment. That's what you guys meant by it?
Yes, and that continuous change, I mean, sometimes you just change. We are thinking from a process perspective as well, right? So if you're changing your process, you're changing the way you're doing. So it's a bigger discussion. Sometimes improvement is part of that process um, exercise.
Actually, I like how you laid that out. Once again, I'm taking you back to the agility side. We don't change an organization in the context of people talk about growth or scaling an organization, and the continuous change is the organizational agility change that needs to happen in the context of I've always got to keep my eye on the market and change to the trends of the market. And things like continuous improvement are just the processes. Continuous integration are just integration. But the key really is in the continuous organization agility change.
Yes. And again, that's what we see in organizations as well. And then that continuous integration is also important, and is part of the three, right? Because if you don't know how to continuously integrate these changes that you're making to your product, then your product is not going to be successful. Like, I've seen products being so poorly integrated that they didn't communicate with other products. Other people didn't know about it. As I said, customer support didn't know about it. How are you going to support a product if you don't try to integrate it to your organization? And we talked about that, Shaheen, in terms of using the ops part, and how we do more on the operation side.
Yeah, yeah.
So Shane's point I thought was very relevant there in the context of continuous integration could be relevant to the customer feedback is not being integrated back into your
Yeah.
organization as a whole.
Yes. Perfect.
Hey, Joanna, let's move on and talk about product owners and product managers. And so in the few minutes that we have left here.
So I wanted to throw this at you because, as I said, I posted this on Facebook and LinkedIn and created a lot of noise. So I had a lot of discussions, some of them good, some of them bad. What There are some comments that I got in terms of I got comments like product owners are roles, product managers are functions, because you have the management part in that. So that means you have the function as a manager. A lot of people didn't see the product manager as a role, so they saw it more of a function, which I found interesting, because to me it was just a role. We would call somebody a product manager, and they would do all those things. I did have a little bit of feedback around the segregation of the roles, and some people mentioned that they would prefer to have one or the other because of the handoffs, not having the product owners focusing more on the tactical product development part, but rather having a product manager doing the tactical as well as the big picture and the management of the entire life cycle. Most of the people we talk to, organizations are hiring for product owners, and then they ask them to do product management roles, in terms of setting up the vision, and a higher level view of the product. So they thought it was just because of the salary band. You hire lower and then you ask people to do more and more. So I definitely want to open it up to you, and let us know what your view is about this. We do think that it's not just product owners or product managers, and based on what we discussed with people from organizations, I think there are two combined. There are the product owners and the product managers. We see them working together even if they are segregated.
So
Hi, this
maybe
is
what,
and I agree with what Joanna just said, because the function of a product manager is very different from product owner. Product owner is like a project manager, which is a temporary endeavor, which is during the activity when that product is being created or maybe mm, upgraded or maintained, and that's where their function is within those lines. Yes, they are the conduit through which the project team, and you want to call it anything, can interact with outside world of their helm. Whereas product manager has to go and operate in a much bigger environment. You have to sell the product, you have to sell the idea first, obtain funding. Product owner may not do all these things. You go and you create a plan how the product would be sold in a in a real environment. I mean, you just gave the example of Uber. One thing is to build that product, but how do you make it popular? how do you ensure that the revenue is coming? And if it is not, what you need to do in order to make it further profitable? So these are the functions which I personally think product managers are different than product owner. Can they be same? Yes, one person can wear both the hats, and depending upon the organization, product, type of industry, yes, it's possible. However, the functions are totally separate.
Joanne, did you ever come up against different names for the product manager?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So the discussion was chief product owner and chief product manager, and from senior to junior. Now the one term that is being introduced lately is the product leader. So the product leader is somebody between the product owner and the product manager. So manages and owns.
So I'm interested because I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly as Yan, but your point was relevant. And if you only gave each of those one title or role, would the product manager really be the customer-centric individual, one who's really working with the customer?
Yes, the product manager would be the one which is going to make that physical part happen, where the product is or product or service is exchanged for money. So if you mean customer is the actual consumer, yes.
Yeah.
Whereas product owner can interact, but is not responsible for converting that product and generating revenue.
So that's where the management function comes into play, right? And the vision of the product and how they put it in the market and how they monitor the sales and so on.
Absolutely, yes, agreed.
Yeah, so that's what we're seeing as well. That function of keeping it higher, to think about all these things, to think about the place, to think about the price, to think about how you promote it. And what type of campaigns you will do, the type of messages that will resonate with customers. So that will be more at the product manager side. Although some people just said that having that segregation between ownership and management just remove them from the actual work that they were doing with the team. So as they got the product, they weren't that enthused about it, or they weren't that passionate about it because they didn't participate in that development.
I love Centil's earlier comment that he is a co-founder. So if anybody on this call is well versed in that situation, it's going to have to be Centil, because he has to do that job today.
Yes.
So you just mentioned, sorry, you just mentioned the point where you talked about, John, you talked about the messaging which goes thereafter, like in the process of converting the product into revenue. And I don't want to use the term sale as a sale here. That becomes then the function of the marketing. So now we are going even the boundary of the outside of the boundary of the product. So then marketing, which will do the messaging and creating advertisement and making sure that the communication is reaching to the people who are going to consume it. And sales is how they are going to find is the final step. But coming back to this specific slide, the biggest differentiator is the second point or second bullet point on both sides. If you look, the product manager manages and owns the product in a portfolio, whereas a product owners is owns is the owner of a product backlog, and that is absolutely big. To me, that's the biggest differentiator.
Yes, and that's why we put it there, to differentiate between the roles. So the one is more like tactical and focused on that particular product and that particular backlog of the product, whereas the other one is more focused on the big picture. So how you align these products, how you integrate them, how you make sure that you sell them or you market them. and not to take away the marketing function, but just be there as a product manager to put together the campaign with the marketing team and be there to provide information and so on.
Just as our time is running up, I'd just like to acknowledge John's comment in the chat about the product owner, the product manager, or the project manager being similar. And if you take the narrower definition of the product owner role, such as what's described here you're talking about, that may in fact be quite true, right? If they're only doing the development part. I guess the other part I like to just mention, going beyond the product manager, and this second bullet point, as you were just talking about, managed products in portfolios, is this idea of how do you make sure your product is actually helping your organization achieve its strategy? How do you make sure your product is going to continue to survive and allow your organization to be sustainable over multiple years? So it's not just that initial delivery and going beyond doing the marketing part and the sales part, is continuing to have a roadmap for the product to enhance it, to improve it, to allow for the overall success.
Peter, you said very valid point, and my question is to you on this. What's your experience, especially when we talk of SAFe methodology, and the highest part of that is the portfolio management of products? In your experience, how the product people are contributing, adapting to the agile methodology to enable the teams at a lower end to deliver?
So SAFe is a very interesting topic, and I took the SAFe certification for fun. I thought I was in a big PMO discussion in the SAFe training. I had a headache, multiple headaches. But I would say the one thing that I liked about SAFe was the management at the value stream level, managing budgets based on value stream. And this is something that I see more and more happening at the portfolio level, just to see those streams of value coming into your organization. And this is something that Peter and I are using for our organization as well, just to see, as we have different products, to see where the streams of value are, which product is actually getting us more value from a benefit perspective, and also, you know, what we're giving in return to our customers. That's my experience with SAFe.
Okay, thank you, Lucia, for your comment. We did refer to Roman Pitcher within our book as well for his value. Anyway, let's wrap up. Joanna, I think as time is no longer our friend, this has been a fascinating discussion.
Yeah, so we have a course, like if you are interested, I mean, it's definitely out there on newgenp.com. We develop it with the product owner in mind, managing, you know, throughout. So being more than a product owner, as you can see, being more of a product manager and managing the entire life cycle. So that's the product life cycle that we have. So it's based on our experience. Again, we do a very tight approach in terms of teaching this. So we have some videos for you to watch. Then we let you do this templates or worksheets so you can actually practice. And then we have weekly meetings just to talk about different things, to talk about the challenges that people have. So we're planning to build the community as well, and these discussions and people interact with each other. And then, of course, we give a certification and a badge, and people can claim PDUs as well. So that's the offering that we have right now. So this is one of the courses. And, you know, for being here and indulging us and participating, we have a special offer. So on our website, it's at $4.99 US. So you can actually get it for $1.99 with this QR code, if you are interested, or if you know somebody else who's interested and who would benefit from this these courses, and you know, the mindset of a product, and learning about product as much as they can, and going back to organizations and talking about product and implementing it. So thank you so much, Shaheen.
Yeah. A special thank you to Joanna and Peter for spending the time with us, and thanks for the special offer for the group. You guys don't mind if we post the material and with a special code to the Slack so that people can access that. And with all that being said, thanks everyone for being here, and please look us up on the meetup and look for the further events that's coming up, and be safe, everyone.